Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third town hall titled Financing the Future in Conversation with Vani Kola. This event is the third in a series that aims to share stories of tech entrepreneurs and industry pioneers from India. These town halls are a lead up to our flagship technology conference, the Global Technology Summit. GTS, hosted in partnership with the Ministry of External Affairs, convenes industry experts, policymakers, scholars, scientists, and other stakeholders from all over the world to deliberate on pressing tech policy issues. The theme of this year's summit is Global Meets Local, and the speaker lineup includes S. Shankar, Lata Reddy, Salil Parekh, Gagandeep Kang, Meenakshi Lekhi, and more. I encourage you to visit the conference website gts2021.com to register and access valuable resources like the Resource Center and the Video Hub. With that, let's get started with the conversation. I'm honored to introduce you to our guest today, Ms. Vani Kola. Vani Kola is the Managing Director at Carnegie Capital, an early-stage venture capital firm based in Bangalore. She is a renowned investor and a visionary known for identifying emerging markets. Her leadership at Kalari centers around her commitment to the development of entrepreneurs and her conviction that Indian companies are poised to become global players. Vani is a technology-focused investor, and many of her investments have now become very successful, validating her aptitude for picking the best young minds and mentoring them. Some of her notable successes include Dream11, QFit, Snapdeal, and Myntra. Vani is profiled in numerous books and has been identified as one of Fortune's most powerful women in business. She's actively involved in various organizations focused on fostering entrepreneurship and women's leadership as well. In today's conversation, we want to focus on Vani's experience of investing in startups in India and the larger ecosystem for technology-driven businesses. Hello and welcome, Vani.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for creating this valuable opportunity for the Indian startup ecosystem.
Thank you. So I'll delve straight into my questions for you. I want to start at the very beginning. You were a successful entrepreneur in the US, and you were there for more than 2 decades. So I just want to ask you, what were your motivations for moving from being an entrepreneur to an investor and from moving from the US to India? And when you moved here, what were the main features of the Indian market that actually convinced you to invest in the technology space?
You know, I just really felt in 2005, 2006 timeframe that India was really the bright spot globally from the entrepreneur opportunity, from being very nascent to being explosive. And if we look at the last decade, that's indeed proven out. So, you know, I think of myself as an entrepreneur first and not as an investor first. And what do entrepreneurs do? They look for, you know, hidden opportunities, connect the dots, and the thrill of sort of really being outside their comfort zone, creating value and that disruption. So I felt that the India I had left in 1985, which was a very different country at that time, to the India that I saw in 2006, was an incredible opportunity for the next 2-3 decades. And that was my motivation, to be part of something grassroots at the beginning on ground zero, and really what it would imply in terms of opportunity for India from a global leadership in entrepreneurship. So that was very recharging, exciting, and intriguing, and a little bit outside my comfort zone also, because I had not worked in India before that, and you know, hence challenging. And you know, and challenges are good. I think we should proactively embrace challenges in life. Entrepreneur to investor, you know, I had built 2 successful companies, and as I thought about where I would spend, I think in very long-term horizons. Maybe a bit old-fashioned or sound old-fashioned, but I think about what is my life in the next decade or even 2 decades. Obviously, you can't script it to a detail, but you have to sort of know directionally where you want your life to go. And I felt that I wanted to create value and impact at a sort of a different platform scale. And so I felt that perhaps as an investor, I'll be able to connect with more entrepreneurs and participate in the emerging edge, if you will. And so that's sort of the context. And, and what India was, what I saw at that time was not so much that all the infrastructure and the problems were solved, but infrastructure problems were there and so many problems were there. But I felt that tech was the only answer for innovation for India to leapfrog or participate in the overall internet economy. We can call that digital economy today, but in the internet economy, which every country has no choice but to participate. I also saw a silver lining. We were behind, but that was also a silver lining because there's a lot of learning that we can then apply to how we leapfrog and solve for India problems. And I think that's also gotten a bit proven out. So yeah, it's been a great decade for me of learning, unlearning, and hopefully meaningfully contributing.
Yeah. And looking back at this past decade of success as an investor, do you think your prior experience as an entrepreneur gave you an edge in some way in identifying other entrepreneurs who were likely to do well or who had good ideas?
Look, I'm biased. I feel that as an entrepreneur, it's not so much about identifying a good founder. I think that's a very different skill. I think as an entrepreneur, you bring certain optimism to problem solving, and how you handle difficulties or setbacks or whatever have you. So I think the advantage I felt as an entrepreneur was really to believe in what is possible. Most of the time when someone has an idea, there is probably 98 reasons why it is unlikely to work. But there is 2 reasons why it may work. And you have to kind of evaluate that, and be excited by that, be optimistic by that possibility, if you will, right? So I think being an entrepreneur allows you to be less skeptical, more embracing, more hopeful about the future. I also think, you are not expecting this to be a straight line path to success. I think it teaches you patience and understanding that problems are part of the journey. Okay. So I think that is the advantage. It's not just so much that, you can identify better founders because you're an entrepreneur. I think you can, but I think that's not the main reason why entrepreneurs should kind of value investors who are entrepreneurs. I think they just have a better empathy and probably can relate more to what you're going through.
And on that theme itself, in preparation for this discussion, I was looking at some past conversations that you've had. And one of the things that struck me was that you've talked about the importance of the business insight or the clarity of the vision of the person who is approaching you to make an investment in them. And you said that that's actually a fairly critical component of your decision making, and sometimes much more so than the actual business plan. So what are some of the key attributes that you look for when you're identifying people who you want to work with?
I mean, as you mentioned, a very clear purpose and approach, right? An understanding of the problem that you're solving and the motivation to why you're solving it. And what is the insight or uniqueness to have you're looking at the problem. Oftentimes, that's the advantage. If we study company after company, they saw a way in where others may neither see opportunity nor a solution, right? That is the foremost. Then, of course, there are many things. Do you have the right team? Can you execute? Can you be a good leader? Does this business actually eventually make money? Does the capital have a risk reward return? So I think all of those are there, but I think they are part of the overall framework, but they're relevant when you have clarity and purpose.
And so when you're making these decisions, in your experience, do you see a lot of this based on organized market research by these people who come and approach you, or is it more of an intuitive understanding of where the gaps are, where consumer demand is likely to be? To what extent do you see decisions made on these bases?
You mean my decisions or the entrepreneur's decisions?
The entrepreneur's decision.
It could probably be classified into three, how should I say, buckets. Sometimes, depending, again, entrepreneurs don't fit into one straight-jacketed mold, right? Some may have spent a lot of time on the problem. They have a deep domain. And I've worked last 10 years in DevOps. There is this gap. It bugs me. Nobody has filled it. And, and I solved it for myself. Now I can offer it to others, or it's bugging me, I'm going to solve. So I think so the ideas arise from sometimes deep domain, okay, knowledge where you have intimate experience of the problem and you want to solve for it, whatever that problem is, right? I had a family member who didn't get the right support when they had cancer, and I'm motivated to solve for that, and I'm going to go find a way to solve for that. So you have an intimate understanding of the problem and you want to find a solution for it. Second is a more, so that's kind of passion-driven problem solving. Second is where somebody is very analytical and, looks at, 5 million people who are underserved with this, and let me do deep, market research and find the white space. People want, how should I say, chemical-free cosmetics, and there is a large opportunity that's underserved. So it's a very market research driven. And then you may say, okay, there is an opportunity here. Let me go figure out. I may not be the solution expert, but let me find the expert. So there is one where it's a solution expert. There is one where they may not be the solution expert, but they have identified this problem and they're gonna, look for the specialist. Okay, who can help altogether, but they bring the vision, whatever. Famously, apparently, Jack Ma did that. Okay, so according to at least some articles. Then the third category is really sort of a gut feel. You're working on something and, YouTube, I just want to upload this video and see how many people like it. I'm going to try this. And somewhere you didn't actually expect to create a business with it. But, things explode and you say, how can I convert this into a business? So it's a gut feel. You didn't plan out to be a structured entrepreneur, but things just emerge, and your solution emerges, and you're kind of bootstrapping and doing things, and you could build a company. So I think it can be any variations of this, in fact, and different entrepreneurs' arc has different journeys on where they start.
Right. That's very interesting. And so, as an investor, how do you actually try to make sense of this? How do you actually think about a investment strategy? Because you've invested in a number of successful ventures, ranging from e-commerce to now gaming and health. So, do you work with a conscious strategic outlook in terms of identifying areas, or is it dependent more on who's approaching you?
It's not so much who's approaching you. It is about listening first and trying to understand. And because we listen to, over 1,000 entrepreneurs, we probably have some sense for where emerging opportunities are, but we almost have no sense for what we call as black swan opportunities, right? Nobody, a category is getting invented that you can't really have any prior research on, and like a Facebook or whatever, and other opportunities. So I think part of this is really paying close attention to the entrepreneur and trying to make sense of what they are. They are the smart ones. They're deeply knowledgeable. They have a opinion, and you're saying, how is this going to come together? And they have a deep passion for it. So it's a lot of listening and then internalizing that and assessing whether you can believe in it with the same enthusiasm and energy. If you do, then you make an investment. If you don't, you don't, which is why this notion of blacklist, anti-portfolio happens. And the anti-portfolio is not because investors are stupid or whatever. It's just that they whatever the entrepreneur's vision was didn't fit into their data framework. Okay, so I think so the active listening part is a key ingredient.
Right. And so once you've actually made the decision to invest and work with a particular startup, can you just take us through the different stages of the investment cycle? How do you actually work with them in terms of the initial stages and then actually helping them scale up? What are the kind of inputs they're looking for from you, not just as an investor, but also as an advisor and a mentor? What are the kinds of roles you're playing through different stages of their scaling up and their growth?
You mean as an investor, or what are the, what is the value add an investor can bring you in scaling your business?
Right. Yeah.
Think of the investor as an active board member. Okay. And their job is to, challenge you to continue to outperform and to prevent you from making catastrophic mistakes. Okay. Now, really at the end of the day, how big a company becomes is the reinvention of the entrepreneur and the original vision, which, really I lay the success of that at the heart of the entrepreneur himself or herself. So while investors can help you develop your organization, help you hire right people, help you access the capital, what they can't help you create the vision or the core strategy for the business. Okay, a company may be growing. Think an entrepreneur says, I want to have this kind of a growth. Somebody says, I want to go this kind of a growth. The investor can't, so when people say, oh, we grew too fast, the investors pushed me. Nobody can actually, in anything in life, push you to do anything. I think, in everything we do, we have to first take responsibility that we are a participant, if not a active and willing, participant. So how much a company grows, how fast, what are some of the aggressive bets that they make, and how they continue to pivot. This is really where the core founding management team does most of the work. Now, enablement of that, right, in terms of providing the support needed, yes, investors can do that. So I would say that first, for growth, there has to be a growth mindset, and that has to come from from you as the founder.
Okay. So I want to move from this a little bit to slightly more high-level question on innovation within these businesses themselves. And you are an investor primarily in technology, and it's a very highly innovative, innovation-driven field. So I just wanted to ask you, what are the kind of differences you see in how startups are thinking about innovation, because they are inherently disruptive and coming up with new business ideas, as opposed to large firms that are already in this space, that are organized? And how do they think differently about innovation and new technologies? And you've also seen a lot of startups that you have invested in and others that have actually now become large firms. So do they actually start thinking about the way they innovate and the way they manage innovations in a different way once they grow larger?
Innovation is not something you get up one day and do. Every startup is going to get obsolete unless they keep innovating and inventing themselves, right? And we have plethora of case studies and stories to validate that, prove that. So I like the phrase, the paranoid survive. So I think you have to assume that somebody will out-innovate you if you are not on your toes. So continuing to have an institutional approach to innovation, whatever that may be, I will spend 10% of my budget, or 20% of our people's times or projects will go into resources, will go into this, that, or the other. And most of the time, companies, what we think as breakthrough products that are coming, have probably been in the making for 2, if not 5 years, right? And there's a long-term thinking. And, everything you try is not going to work out. And to be like, okay, with that experimentation mindset, right? So I think the reason why large established companies, though they have access, though they have, which is distribution or customer or whatever, though they have capital, though they have enormous resources, and it's not smart people that are in these organizations at any level, from senior management to any level. The reason they get out innovated is the DNA of making quick decisions and seeing something that's ahead, and being able to embrace, adapt it. You kind of get a little slow and sluggish with size. Size affects speed, and these are general statements. Obviously, there are always, exceptions to the rule, but we are talking about just generally. And I think startups have that nimbleness. So which is why the question of, why couldn't this, whatever XYZ brand, company not do this? The reason is because time and again, we have proven that startups can out innovate faster.
Right. Very interesting. And this is probably also the reason why a lot of large companies set up separate units or subsidiaries to actually do a lot of the innovation on the side for them. That's a very good insight. And I just wanted to ask you a question about what you see as the major developments that are taking place in the tech space in terms of the market maturity? Because now we are seeing a lot of startups coming to a scale where they're now becoming unicorns and so on. So how do you think the tech sector is likely to evolve in the next 5 to 6 years? Is it undergoing a period of maturity, or do you think there's still a lot of scope for disruption for new startups to come in?
Look, the startup opportunity is a evergreen, perpetual opportunity. Okay. Everything is going to get disrupted 3 times over in each of our lifetimes. Okay. So the question is being able to participate or embrace that pace of disruption, and I think globally and in India, we are living through extraordinary times where use of technology from any sector is only increasing very, very, very rapidly, right? If you say transportation, from EV to autonomous to whatever else, I mean, there is a disruption. If you say health care, from robotic surgery to this, to that, to whatever, there is disruption. So, I think every sector, there is one technology deeply embedded, is getting more and more deeply embedded. And our lives are moving more and more digital. In fact, if we sit back and think, I don't think we can easily, how should I say, frame what our lives 20 years from now might be like. If we thought even 10 years ago, I'll pay my milkman from my phone, which sounds very simple today, right? And that'll be instantaneous. We wouldn't think that is the case, right? And even as simple as that, let alone any other bigger disruptions, to say we land on Mars or whatever. So those are at a very different scale. If we say that there is a space economy, I don't think we would have, you don't have to think 20, 30 years. You just look back to 10 years. And I think some way what we have today will be unrecognizable, and same way, I think the digital life, I mean, we talk about metaverse today, and, the phygital or just, the game world intersecting into entertainment very, very deeply. And, what starts out as limited and hardcore, eventually, and time frame may vary, becomes, mass. And then it takes a different turn. You can say automobile as a hobby versus automobile as available to everyone. So, so I think we have lived through many of those, and the pace of it has enormously changed in our world, right? We have all seen these charts. How long did it take for 75% of the world to adopt a phone versus a refrigerator or TV versus internet versus something else? And so we see the technology adoption curve really rapidly changing, So I think we are living in one of the most sort of disruptive times of our life.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask my last couple of questions about more specifically government role in enabling entrepreneurship in technology specifically. And over the last decade or so, one of the things India has done is to create a lot of enabling infrastructure for the growth of technology-based products and services. We've created Aadhaar, we've created a world-class payment system like UPI. So first, is it true that this has actually enabled and accelerated a lot of innovation in the tech space? And without it, we might have probably seen lower growth in this space. And the other part of the question is, do you think there are other similar components of a digital infrastructure that need to be built out to facilitate entrepreneurs coming into this space?
The one word answer is yes, yes. I think it was really fortuitous, brilliant, genius, whatever you want to use, that it's kind of like you had the road and the port and, trade picked up kind of a thing, I mean, I think we laid the digital infrastructure to make convenient, fast, affordable, payments and personal identification, which are both cornerstone for any economy, right? Virtually free. And then we could layer value and services on top of that. If you don't have the road, you can't get from A to B. And this was the road, the digital road. And I think without that, I don't think we would see the level of, digital adoption that we have seen in the country, and hence the problem solving that has been able to bring. Of course, every time there is disruption, while somebody gains, the entrenched also changes, right? It's kind of like if I'm getting, my groceries home, we can say that it is putting somebody else out of business, but it is convenient for me, and somebody else is getting new jobs because of that, but somebody else is losing their job, right? So that also, we need to understand the nature of that and not be protectionist. Of course, we have to help people upskill, and we have to make sure that it's fair and equitable, but protectionism doesn't work. And I think in every space, whether it is education, health, I mean, what is the role of a government and what's the role of technology? Technology, by the way, has to exist only because it makes lives better. It makes people's lives better. It makes the planet better. I mean, if it serves no purpose, then, what is the use of technology? And governments have a role to ensure that it is equitable to most of the citizens, so that it's not just the few who get to enjoy the value proposition or the benefits of this, right? So
Yeah.
given that, creating that infrastructure that sort of, delivers the constitutional promise of, equality to citizens, is the government's role. And that is only role for regulation also. Okay. Regulation is not to prevent. Regulation is to make sure everybody gets fair access. Okay. So I think in many areas, whether we make commerce easier, whether it's easy for people who may not have large pocket to still participate in wealth building into the equity markets, whether everybody can get affordable healthcare, because technology should allow for that to happen. And, so there are so many areas in which we can lay the roads, so to speak, and let innovation or entrepreneurship build value on top of it.
And my last question is on a similar note, which is, and specifically as a public policy researcher, I often think about the idea of regulatory bottlenecks being an obstacle to entrepreneurship. And I just wanted to ask you, do you think that there is a significant regulatory issue in bringing in first more financing and more sources of finance into entrepreneurs who are just starting up? And B, do entrepreneurs, in your opinion, face significant regulatory bottlenecks when they're starting up? Obviously, their compliances increase when they attain a certain size and scale. But at a startup stage, do you think regulation is a problem, or do you think the major constraints
at a startup scale, I don't think regulation is a problem. I think regulation is an important part of growth. Okay. We can say, why are regulators looking at Facebook? But we can also say, are we protecting minority interests? Are we, ensuring that somehow technology makes you immune to responsibility towards a collective inclusion and responsibility for civil society, and so technology doesn't mean you can promote hate speech on a platform and say that is okay, right? So regulation exists and must exist for very many different reasons. Okay, technology, by the way, can and does get misused, right? So ethics in technology, you can call that regulation, whatever, but it starts with the ethics of technology and then goes to codifying that as regulation. So for that purpose, you can argue it should be free internet. Yes, at some level it should, but at another level, there's a responsibility of that it doesn't mean you can transfer money to fund terror. Okay, so, or things like that, right? So now startups per se in India, I don't think immediately face any major regulatory risks, right? But I do think that there are 2 or 3 areas where I think when they scale, most of the entrepreneurs versus entrenched companies, right, are not set up for, significant regulation that from a DNA, they're not attuned to manage as a process, and suddenly, becomes something they'd have to work through. They might get a unicorn, whatever in 4 or 5 years, but the underlying, company framework may not have grown to that scale of regulatory management. Okay, so that's one. Then I think, there's a lot that a government can do thoughtfully, from encouraging new industry development, and also from, money is a virtuous cycle. It has to keep spinning. Otherwise, if it is stagnant, it doesn't grow. Okay. So exits are a little complicated. I mean, when you exit a company, tax is not clear. I mean, there are many things that are not clear. So the flow of money out and in, I think there is some thought we can do to make that, easier. Also encouraging more money to flow into innovation, right? I think there are things we can and should do about that. Tax is a tool. It can either be incentive or it can be punitive. And, only the government wields that tool. So they can think about that. And on emerging technologies, I think governments can be innovative. I mean, the whole debate on cryptocurrency and, what we will do, what we will not do, digital payments, that was a decade ago, like that, we took too long. And drones or this or that or whatever, genomics. I mean, so different areas that are disrupting, governments need to be, if not ahead, need to be in sync on not creating punitive regulation.
Thank you. We have about 5-6 minutes left, and we have a couple of questions from the audience. So
Sure.
I'll just read them out to you. One of the questions is, what are some of the mistakes that a lot of entrepreneurs make early in their journey?
There's a yin yang of how fast should I grow, how much money should I burn. There's no one right silver bullet answer to that, but the answer can determine the overall success of the business. And so it's a more nuanced answer, but many times there are mistakes that founders do there. Second is, building right teams. Sometimes there is a dissonance in the management team or the founding team, and they don't have structures to work through those conflicts. So not having enough conflict resolution mechanism, because conflict is inevitable.
Right.
If you know that it's inevitable, then think through how you're going to work through conflict resolution and conflict management, but often there isn't. And sometimes you're too wedded to what you believe that you are not willing to pivot, right? And being able to pivot is important. When there is market feedback loop, and you have to be constantly adapting to the market feedback loop that you are receiving, and continuing to build your shareholder base very thoughtfully as you would build your founding team. So those are some things to think about.
The next question is about how your experience as a business person in the US and India has been different, and what differences have you observed in the two countries while you worked there?
Look, I mean, at the highest level, there are no differences in the sense that, there's a motivation to prove success and, create value. But I almost find these kind of comparative discussions not very useful. Every country, culture has its certain system and framework in which it operates, and it's effective, right? And what is important if I'm going to enter India as a market is to understand what it takes to succeed in India, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm going to be an Indian company selling to US customers, just to understand, right? I think, to me, this notion of what are the differences between US and India, I mean, so why? I mean, what difference does it make? Whatever the differences are, right? But when you enter a market, you learn that market and you figure out how to operate, how to succeed there. It's like saying, what is the difference in working for Tata's versus RIL or whatever? I don't know, I mean, I think you have to figure out what works for you and which systems, which frameworks you can succeed in, and make that be your win or your strength. So I'm sorry, but it's not a very useful question from my perspective.
And there's one last question about women entrepreneurs, and the question is about the fact that there's a lot of male entrepreneurs in the tech sector in India especially. So how do you get more female entrepreneurs into the sector? What are the things that can be done?
Well, I mean, if you haven't been aware of the CXXO program that Kalari has launched, I would encourage you to go to our website and take a look at it. For any problem, female entrepreneurs or otherwise, I just think if each of us do something, you can call it climate problem or environment problem or any problem, it all starts with what can I do, and am I doing that I can do. There is approaching a problem from sort of, let's solve the world problem at a policy, at a maybe regulation, at a certain level, but most of us are not in that seat. So what we do is we complain about the problem, and because we think the responsibility for that is somewhere else, right? But all problems are solved largely from ground up, okay? So if you're a leader, are you equitable hiring in your organization? Are you mentoring women at home? How are you? Are you allowing same opportunity for your daughters and sons? And, in each aspect, and if I'm an investor, am I seeking out adequate women to invest, right? So each of us have a sphere, however small or big that sphere is. If you're a policymaker, your platform may be this. If you are, I'll come to a home example in a minute, but it may be small, but still you can create that impact by your action. So I would say each of us has to create action. For example, talking about small space of influence, my mother, though not educated, deeply believed in making sure we were educated and we had a platform to truly, go out there and feel confident to achieve. And she played a very deep role. Now we can say it's a very limited, you can say, but it is not that limited if you think about the trickle effect of that, right? So maybe her world, she could only do that much, but that's enough, So each of us are not powerless. So for any problem, female entrepreneurs or otherwise, but at Kalari, I would encourage you to please look at CXXO. And, and if you know female founders, we should be funding, please, refer them to us. And in your own day-to-day, whatever you can do to create more opportunities for women, please do.
Thank you for that. And we are out of time, but this has been a great discussion. Vani, thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us, and especially about the industry and your personal experiences. I'm sure viewers will find it really helpful. And thanks a lot to the viewers for tuning into this. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to look this up and be sure to register for the Global Technology Summit starting on December 14th. And you can register at for the Global Technology Summit by visiting our website, gts2021.com. Thank you. And thank you, Vani.
Thank you, Anirudh.